So I understand that there is Islamic extremism in this country, as there is throughout the world, and sometimes it leads to acts of terror. Like if you remember in New York, there was a guy who ran over 8 people and killed them near the end of last year, and that was terrible. And the authorities have actually done some decent job in blocking some Islamic extremism. But there's also right-wing extremism, and with the exception of Charlottesville, is not talked about very much in the media. So I wish somebody would do a poll on this. If you ask Americans, what do you think is the bigger threat, Islamic terrorism or right-wing terrorism in America? I would be surprised if the answer was an 80 to 90% Islamic terrorism, and that is of course wrong. So I say of course because the Anti-Defamation League has done a study on it, and I wanted to share that with you and then give you some other numbers as well. So they explained that white supremacists in the United States killed more than twice as many people in 2017 as they did the year before. So they seem, I don't know if the right word is encouraged, but certainly more active these days. I wonder why. And were responsible for far more murders than domestic Islamic extremists, helping make 2017 the 5th deadliest year on record for extremist violence in America, a new report states. Now, this is the Anti-Defamation League. They got no interest in any of this extremism. They want none of it, and they're certainly not trying to cover up Islamic extremism, which they are very concerned about. But they looked at the numbers, and this is what the numbers say. And they did not count mass shooters. They didn't count random shootings. No, they're only talking about shootings where there is a stated political purpose, and so those are the only ones that count. So these are only the ones where they said, I'm a right winger, I'm doing it for this reason, that reason, political reason, and hence the word extremism or terrorism. So the report called Murder and Extremism in the United States in 2017, published Tuesday by the Anti-Defamation League Center on Extremism, said extremists killed 34 people last year. 20 of those victims, or 59%, were killed by right-wing extremists, a designation that includes white supremacists, members of the so-called alt-right and alt-light, and members of the anti-government militia movement. Now, if you're thinking, well, but I didn't see all that. I saw the big news about the guy in New York, but I didn't see a lot of those killings. That's not because they didn't happen, it's because they don't get a lot of coverage. So, and this is what the ADL is pointing out. In fact, it's not just this past year. Now, if you look at these numbers over the past 10 years, it shows you that the numbers are actually even starker when you look at a broader time frame. 71% of terrorist attacks by extremists have been by right-wing extremists. So now, look, the numbers are not good for Islamic extremism either because they are disproportionate to the population in America. So they are both deeply troubling. But do we overcover one and undercover the other? Yes, and more importantly, what is our government doing? Now, I'll get to that in a second in terms of the Trump administration, but I wanted to show you that there are some people that are upset about this. So when the Secretary of Homeland Security was testifying in front of the Senate, Senator Booker from New Jersey had this to say.
I know you're aware of a 2017 GAO report that found, and I quote, out of the 85 violent extremist incidents that resulted in deaths in September 12, 2001, far right-wing violent extremist groups were responsible for 73%. When I go through the Black Belt in the South, when I'm in Atlanta, black churches in Newark, they're concerned about jihadist Islamic terrorism. We watched the Twin Towers from Newark go down. But since 9/11, 85 violent incidents, 73% were with people that hold bigoted, hateful ideas about minorities.
So similar numbers there from two different groups. Cory Booker quoting the 73% number, which is very similar to the number that the Anti-Defamation League came up with over the last 10 years, was 71% by right-wing extremists. So, for example, there was a guy who came out of Maryland and decided he needed to kill black people because he was reading the neo-Nazi website Daily Stormer, went to New York and killed a poor African-American man with a sword. Racism on college campuses, the right wing likes to downplay that. They say, oh, really, when does it ever happen? Well, you didn't hear it because CNN didn't blare it from the rooftops when they do in other instances. And someone should ask them why they are so selective in this coverage. So in reality, in Maryland, there was on a college campus there, a guy, again, a right-wing extremist, but on college, goes up to a black student and murders him. And he did it because he's a white supremacist. That got almost no coverage. So it happens over and over and over again. Kamala Harris, another senator, pointing out in a tweet, it is deeply troubling that when talking about threats to our nation, Secretary Nielsen failed to mention a report that talks about some of the most rampant terror attacks that face our nation. Domestic acts of terror, including white supremacist extremists. Now, that is relevant because right now, Nielsen's the head of Homeland Security. Homeland Security, Trump administration is in charge. So do I want them to combat Islamic extremism? Of course, of course. We all live in this country. We don't want to die from any of these terrorists. But do I want them to spend as much time or a proportionate amount of time also fighting right-wing extremism? Of course, who wouldn't want that? Except the Trump people. Get a load of this. The Trump administration last year revoked federal funding for a program aimed at de-radicalizing neo-Nazis. Look, even under Obama, they defunded parts of the government that were focused on right-wing extremists. And guess what happened? We had more right-wing extremist plots that were carried out and cost people's lives. By the way, all of this is disproportionate. The media coverage is disproportionate. The way the government handles it is disproportionate. And you keep asking yourself, why? Why does every time a Muslim does something, all of cable news goes blasted nonstop? That's fine, because those are big, interesting events. But then when a right-wing terrorist comes and executes someone and does it for the same kind of political reasons and declares it as such, nothing. Why is that not interesting? Why is that not also concerning? And then finally, think about how disproportionate all of this is. I mean, the good news is those numbers overall are low. So 34 people killed last year. In one mass shooting in Vegas, for example, but pick your mass shooting, we had about 58 people killed, more than all of the terrorist acts in America combined. You know what the real problem is? And so these terrorists, some of them did it with knives, some of them did it with buses, with trucks, I should say. Some of them did it with swords. But the mass shootings that kill far more people are done with guns. And those high-powered weapons wind up killing a lot more of us. And the coverage of that, should the big mass shootings, now you got to get to like 50 people before they cover it nonstop. Now when you just shoot and kill 4 people, it's not that big a story, it just goes away right away. Partly because we are inundated by it, to be fair to the media. And partly because it's not as scary. Oh, boo, the Muslims are coming, oh my God. Oh, your neighbor shot 12 of you. Yeah, anyway, we're moving on. Understand what the real threats are, understand the proportion of those threats so that we could respond. You know why? Because I want to keep everybody safe. We want our families safe, we want our communities safe. So let's actually spend the resources, the time and the energy in addressing the issues that are going to keep us safer, not just get everybody into a hate and fear-filled world where people use it for political demagoguery. If you like this video, bless your heart. We got a lot more where that came from. We do a full show every day, Monday through Friday. Come enjoy it ad-free by becoming a member, tytnetwork.com/join.